Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Oak Performance Radio. I'm your host, Adam Lane. If you're new to the show, our goal here is to create some content, some fantastic content for athletes, parents, and coaches. We tell stories, have laughs, and go into everything that is the end game of athletic performance, helping athletes achieve their optimal performance and be the best they can possibly be. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Happy, Healthy, Strong podcast and Oak Performance Radio. We're going to tag team this one because Dr. Hunter Waldman is with us today from North Alabama, correct?
Yep. Yeah. University of North Alabama.
Fantastic. So, Coach, thanks for joining us on this beautiful Friday morning. We know you're a busy guy. You got lots going on in your life. So many things going on. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Love to be on different podcasts and be able to talk about just how to get people healthier, and whether that's through nutrition or training, or, I've always said as a researcher that if I'm doing this just to publish and not share it with people, I'm just totally wasting my time. The goal of science is to be able to communicate it with everyone, not just other scientists. So these type of platforms allow me to do that, to share this information. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, this is exciting. Coach, for the tens of people that listen to this show that might not know who you are and why you're such a big deal, tell these people who Dr. Hunter Waldman is and why you're such a big deal.
Yeah, well, definitely not a big deal, but I appreciate that. So just quick background, did my undergrad and master's at the University of North Alabama, played college football. I was a history major, got interested in sports nutrition mainly because during college years, I got up to 250 as a linebacker in college. It was just football weight. Ended up getting a lot of concussions, ended up having to drop back from football. And then it was like, well, metabolically, I just wasn't healthy. So I ended up taking a nutrition course and then left the history major, jumped all the way into nutrition head first, went on and did my doctorate at Mississippi State University under Matt McAllister. And we really combined our areas. In his area was inflammation, oxidative stress, which we might talk a little bit about today. And then I really brought that nutrition side that I had become so passionate about. And then did a lot of work during that time with the tactical population, a lot of firefighters, some of special ops and military, police officers. And now, so I'm back at the University of North Alabama, where I'm the director of the Human Performance Biochemistry Lab. And a lot of our work is looking at essentially how to improve what we call metabolic flexibility in a range of individuals. So taking a step back, I also worked with Gatorade as a sports scientist for a period of time. And we worked with NFL and NBA and MLB and just all the top 1% athletes. And while that was I just really did enjoy my time with them and great people. The athletes themselves, I just wasn't as passionate about making the 1%er jump another inch higher, their vertical jump. That just, for me, that wasn't ticking the passion box. But then I'm working with moms and dads and younger athletes and getting them healthier. And it may just be a mom who's working 2 jobs and 2 kids and just trying to improve her metabolic health. And so that's really where a lot of our research focuses now, specifically on the female side, both athletes and just your general pop. But for those who are unaware of metabolic flexibility, it's simply your capacity to use fat or carbohydrate. Those are the 2 main fuels. There's also protein, but it's negligible in terms of how much you use for fuel. So fat and carbohydrate, your ability to use those fuels pending the stimulus. So if you're just sitting at your desk, if you're asleep, your body, your cells should be able to rely on your own body fat. And then as the stimulus, whether it be exercise or stress, as that stimulus gets more intense, the cell will shift from fat to carbohydrate if it's metabolically flexible. And if not, we call that metabolically inflexible. And that's actually what we're seeing more and more of, especially with the obesity and overweight epidemic that's going on right now, is that people can't access their body fat very well. They're becoming totally sugar dependent. And so my goal, whether it be through nutrition, training, or dietary supplements, is how do we get the cell back to an ability to become, quote unquote, flexible in its ability to burn the fuels that it should be able to? And then how do we manage these other stressors, which me and you were talking about a second ago before the show started, which, again, we've talked about cold plunge and sauna, and I know these are hot topics, and any biohacker is going to tell you have to incorporate these 3 times a day. And But my pushback is like, we have to, these are all stressors. Everything's a stressor, including exercise. Sleep can be a stressor, which is crazy. No, people usually don't talk about that. But if you sleep for 8 hours, you're essentially entering into a dietary fast. And so the cells will upregulate these stress pathways to help fuel themselves while you're asleep. So it is in a sense a stressor. And so we got to learn how to start managing these stressors rather than just continuing to compound them with additional stressors to the point of now it becomes a detriment. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing here at the university.
Very cool. So let's just jump right to it. Metabolic flexibility. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's a great question. The biggest gap in that area right now in that research is we know what the definition is, but the question is how much fat should you be able to burn at rest or not burn to be considered flexible or inflexible? And so there's really no criteria, which is one of my goals before I take a dirt nap, is to develop criteria for being able to establish that. So whether it be for the clinical setting or not. But let's say that, so we don't have criteria to say, this is how much fat you should be able to burn at rest or at walking or at running or lifting weights. We don't have that. We just have a basic definition. But how can you improve it? And there's several ways. And it all starts with, this is the hardest part because I could be talking to a range of people listening. I could be talking to athletes who may already be metabolically flexible. And so once you're there, now we're building off of that. It's really kind of the foundation for training after that. But I could be on the other end of the spectrum with someone who is dealing with metabolic syndrome, maybe insulin resistance, maybe type 2 diabetes or hypertension. So you have to take this into context. But usually if you're talking about your 35 to 40-year-old male or female who is getting in maybe 3 training days a week, maybe, and then most of their day is sedentary, there's probably going to be, and then again, older than 35 or 40, but that kind of be in the minimum threshold, not really talking to the teens or young adolescents yet. Then these are usually where we start to see metabolic inflexibility occur. And the very base to start is you have to train. You have to have caloric expenditure because actually John Wellborn and I were texting yesterday. There is no greater, it's all about creating a metabolic disturbance in the cell. And of course that can go deep real quick, but how do you create a metabolic disturbance? Well, there's various ways. You could dietary fast. That's what we're going to, just simple caloric restriction. You can take various supplements and manipulate it through nutrition, but there's nothing that does that better than training. And it doesn't have to be, I'm all about the power athlete type training. I believe in lifting heavy weights and sprinting and then doing some low aerobic, long, steady state type work as well. But, I tell my wife too, she's not about that. I mean, she's just not. She likes the group exercise classes. She likes, people to tell her what to do, grab her 5s or 10s and go at that for an hour. And you know what? That's fine. Would I like to see her lift heavier weights? For sure. But from a metabolic flexibility standpoint, that's still creating the disturbance that she needs to stay healthy. And so that's numero uno in terms of where, if we look at the pyramid and the biggest return on investment, it's going to be, you got to train. And then it's, well, how much? Well, it depends, minimum 2 or 3 times a week. But it's got to be to a point where there's definitely like a recovery period. If you're walking away from every training session feeling rejuvenated in both physically and mentally, then we probably need to look at the intensity of that training program. Not saying that those sessions shouldn't exist. I'm not saying, I definitely believe in the long, steady state, zone 2 type aerobic session, once to 3 times a week, maybe, depending on your goals. And that is how you would feel from that. But anybody knows if you do a hard resistance training session, mentally you may feel better, but physically you're going to be hurting for a little bit. And that's okay. That's to be sore again, because these are all signals telling me as a researcher, but telling the person who just did it as well that, hey, we created some disturbance. Now the body has to recover. And that's what we need. Your session should have a recovery period, should be intense enough that they require some type of recovery. So that would be the baseline where I would start, 45, 60 minutes, hard, get after it, put the phone away, unless you've got a Train Heroic or some type of app on there that you're following, but you're not on social media, you're keeping rest periods down, and you're really pushing the body to a point where some sets you kind of have to mentally just lock in. You just have to prepare for whatever you're about to do. It shouldn't be a talk sesh the whole time. If you're doing that, we have to get back and look at it. And again, that's relative to each person. I'm training some men in my neighborhood. Sometimes they'll come over before church Sunday mornings, and we'll just get after it. Well, one of them has type 2 diabetes. He's on metformin. He's about to be 60 years of age. And then I've got a Marine that comes over. He's 33 right now. Obviously, they do the same training that I have, but it's relatively different because the type 2 diabetic, we do all body weight calisthenics. We're just trying to get caloric expenditure. My Marine, we've got pretty heavy dumbbells, again, going through same movements. So push-ups versus bench press versus pull-ups versus a supine row. So same type of workout, but relative to each person, but the intensity is still there. And so that's what I'm focused on as a baseline where we start.
There we go. So to drive people, and if we're focused on the adults right now, we'll get to the kids here in a second.
Yeah, we can go anywhere.
So if we're focusing on metabolic flexibility for adults, and this is something we obviously cut from the same cloth here. We push here. This is why we're Oak Strength. This is why we're not Oak Fitness or Oak Boot Camp, but like Oak Strength. We believe that strength is that foundation of the pyramid, and the bigger the base, the higher the peak. Can I say that the number one driver, if you're trying to improve that metabolic flexibility, if you're trying to be more efficient at burning your fats when you need to burn fats and burning your carbs when you need to burn carbs, is strength training? Can I make that claim? Is it or it's in the top few here?
I would definitely within context. And again, of course, we could go back and forth on this forever. And me and John have done this before. I think for the general audience, for everyone listening, to answer your question, I would put strength training up there, with the caveat that the muscle is metabolically healthy. To say that, you can do strength training. We see that, let's say you're power lifter. I'm not saying power lifters are metabolically inflexible, but they're an easy population to pick on, because you can have someone who does a lot of strength training, and yet there are other dietary or lifestyle factors like their dietary intake that offset some of the strength training that they do. You can't do just strength training and be morbidly obese and tell me that you're metabolically flexible. That's not how the cell responds to that. So strength training, absolutely, because it all comes back to, again, that base, what you're talking about, strength. It's really about muscle mass. It's how much muscle mass can you carry, again, relative to each person. There's a way to calculate that's called the fat-free mass index. So FFMI, you can calculate your FFMI. And to figure out how much, as a normal, natural person, how much muscle mass can I carry? And then you'll get it in pounds, or you can calculate it in kilograms. But and then from there, it's really get as high of an FFMI as you can, and then relatively as low body fat as you can. So we're trying to balance those two. So how much muscle can I maintain or even improve while driving body fat fairly low? Now, again, there's a range there because you can drive it too low and then hormones plummet and some other things happen. So, but yeah, I mean, how do you improve or maintain muscle mass other than protein intake? Strength training. So within the context of what we're talking about, I would put strength training there. Yes.
There we go. If I'm, again, this 35, 45-year-old person, which I am, and I'm listening to the show right now, I'm thinking to myself, am I metabolically flexible? Is that, how do I know?
Yeah, so probably there's a couple ways, and again, this is not medical advice, because when we look at metabolic flexibility, I've got $100,000 pieces of equipment that I'm able to test it pretty much directly. But when I'm talking to the mom or dad, like right now, or ourselves, I'm 33, about to be 34. When I get asked that, and we don't have that equipment, what's a practical way? Well, there's a couple ways. So for both men and women, generally, if you're carrying excess body fat, there's a level of insulin resistance that's starting to accumulate there. So what is excess? Men, if you're getting over about that 18% mark, and again, that's an easy thing. You can walk into most health food stores now or GNCs and do a body fat scanner. I think they're called MBODs. And if done right, they're fairly accurate. You can have skin folds done pretty cheap wherever you go. You can also just look, if you have a gut that hangs over the belt line, that is absolutely some metabolic inflexibility occurring. That's some insulin resistance that you're seeing there. And people that are metabolically flexible tend to be insulin sensitive. If you get blood work done and you have high triglycerides, blood fat, if you have high cholesterol, if you have high blood pressure, these are all indirect markers that at the cell level, you probably have some metabolic inflexibility occurring. So these are just easy ways. If you have brain fog when you wake up in the morning, again, assuming, we're just me as a physiology professor, this is just anatomy, but men, if you wake up and there's no erection there, that's a telltale sign of that there's probably some metabolic inflexibility there. When people say, well, I thought that was testosterone being low. Well, yeah, I mean, we see those two go hand in hand. As metabolic inflexibility goes up, testosterone plummets. So these are for females. As you start to get closer to what we call the perimenopausal window, so that's going to be starting around 40, 45 years of age. Metabolic inflexibility definitely goes up because estrogen is so protective of those fat burning pathways. Well, guess what happens to estrogen once you start nearing menopause? You secrete less of it. The whole hormonal pathway shuts down essentially. So there's no estrogen. You have brittle bones. You start to atrophy muscle. There are ways to protect that. Number one way, strength train. The number one way to offset menopausal symptoms, including a drop in estrogen, is to strength train. Well, again, that also goes back to metabolic flexibility because you are protecting that by doing strength training. So if you're waking up with brain fog, man, if you're waking up and there's, again, 7 days out of the week, you're not having an erection 2 or 3 times on the mornings that you wake up. If you have excess body fat, so men over 18%, women, if you're getting over about 20 to 22%, there's some metabolic inflexibility occurring. Again, in any of these markers, indirect markers of hypertension, blood triglycerides, blood glucose, if those are high, those are all telltale signs that you've got some type of metabolic inflexibility occurring. So now it's like, okay, we need to address this. And so we already kind of hit on strength training. The very next thing I'm jumping people on is the dietary side, where I spend a lot of my time. So most of my research on the nutrition side early on was on what we call carbohydrate restriction. I've definitely opened up my view. I went in because that's how I improved my metabolic health. I went on a lower carb diet. I totally flipped my health around, and I thought everybody should do that. I do not, stay on that path anymore. My dissertation actually flipped me on that, and it's like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the right diet for everybody. However, it does tend to have immediate and very drastic effects when you start to pull back on carbohydrate intake. People would want to argue, well, it's about overall caloric load. Okay, I agree with that. Yeah, calories are first. In general, you're probably 1, overeating calories, and 2, undereating protein. Okay, so let's say, though, where do you start first? Usually I would start someone who's, again, who we're talking to, I would say, hey, we need to up our protein intake. That's probably the first thing, because just by upping protein intake, you're going to increase satiety rating. So in other words, you're going to increase fullness. If anybody knows, if I put a plain chicken breast in front of you, no salt, no pepper, no condiments, there's only so much of that, and assuming it's cooked, there's only so much of that you can eat before you push that away and say, hey, I don't want any more. Because when we look at what we call hypothalamic or hedonic regulation of eating, there's only so much of that you will want to eat before your brain says, hey, I've got enough. I got the protein I need. We're good to go. But if I put in front of you your favorite dessert, well, now all of a sudden that fullness goes away and it's like, oh, I can keep eating. What happened there? And again, you're overriding these signals in the brain that tell you when you're supposed to stop eating, you can keep going on. So I tell people protein has 2 things. It has the highest thermic effect of food, meaning that every time you eat it, you get this very large boost in metabolic rate. but it also has a high satiety rating. So the more you eat, the fuller you feel. So you're not going to be as likely to go and want to eat little snacks and where these little hidden calories, where they start to essentially accumulate. So we get protein up, but then the question is okay, so that'll probably help decrease calories there. But then we still got our lipids or fat, and then we got our carbohydrate. Yes, when you look at what the science says, it doesn't matter really if you pull it from lipids or carbohydrate. As long as you pull back some, you're going to have beneficial effects metabolically. But I always tell people, look at your overall intake every day. The typical person, it's so high. It's all ultra processed, but it's much easier to tell someone to pull back on their carbohydrate intake a little bit because they're going to think breads, sweets, little Debbie cakes, the candy. If you tell someone to pull back on their fats, it's like, where do I find those at? They're looking for oils, they're looking for butters and dressings, and that's fine. But how often are people actually eating that through the day? It's much more practical to tell someone, hey, I like to do 10%, what we call 10% step reduction. So you do a 3-day food log, record everything each day, and then average it. How much protein are you taking per day? How much carbohydrate and how much fat? So the first goal, trying to get about 1 gram per pound of body weight or close to that. The lower end, 0.8 grams per pound. So if you weigh 200 pounds, close to what I weigh, I'm trying to get anywhere between 180 grams to 200 grams a day of protein. So that's my first goal. And then I tell people, hey, let's just focus on that. Let's do that for 4 weeks. That's it. That's all. I don't care what else you eat. You just make sure you get that every day. And then we can build off of that. So let's accomplish that. Okay, next step. Generally, they're taking in 50% of their diets coming from carbohydrate. Look at the sedentary lifestyle. That's a lot of carbohydrate coming in. And if you look at those metabolic pathways, carbohydrate is really intended for those higher intensity type training days, those sessions. And there are other effects there, but I like to do a 10%, what we call step reduction. So we go from 50% to 40%. It's not that big of a drop, and it's not really a low carbohydrate, but it is carbohydrate restriction. And if you look at the literature and the research I've done on this stuff, just a 10% reduction has drastic effects. People feel better. They bring their blood glucose down. The brain fog goes away. They start to reduce body fat. And that's probably in a combined synergistic effect from reducing carbs a little but increasing protein. But those are like the first 2 things I do from a dietary standpoint. I know that was a lot. I get on rants and then I go, and then Adam, you just have to stop me when I get going.
Well, and I think I can't tell you how many times like that we have said that, not with the science-based background that you have, but like, hey, I'm off my A game. I'm overweight. I want to drop a little weight. I want to gain a little muscle. I want to look a little better. Lift weights, eat more protein. Like that's if you're missing stuff like that. And
get sleep.
Yes. Well, here let me tie this in really quick. In the way of just a couple of weeks ago, we did we do an annual nutrition presentation for the volleyball club that we're partnered with, and it's always a challenging thing. We'll do it with the guys and the girls, but being a middle-aged man telling adolescent girls how to eat is not my skill set. Like that, I'm good at a few things. Telling 16-year-olds they need to eat like this or like that is not it. In the way of recommendations, so if parents are listening to this, they're thinking it hopefully for their own health and wellness, but then also like they want their kid to be successful within sport and healthy in the same breath. Same recommendations for protein and whatnot. Obviously, sleep. Everyone needs sleep. Get as much sleep as you can. If they're athletes, they're training, whether it be actually, in the sport or in the weight room. But in the way like the nutritional recommendations for, let's say, middle school, high school athletes.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah. Great question. So just again, to the audience, we just talked we're in the adoption process. We don't have kids yet. We will soon. So it's hard. I've always kind of tipped my hat to, hey, it's easy to talk about it, but until you've been there and done it, I keep that in my mind when I talk about this stuff. And I do talk to parents, and I've talked to kids and the high school kids and middle school kids. And I'm always very conscious about specifically talking to female teenagers, because I feel like they're already under so much pressure, whether they're athletes or not, about body image. And then, I definitely am I've had experience with the disordered eating side as well with people I've worked with. So overall, I change it a little bit when we're talking under the age of about 21. Usually under the age of 21, that really those teen years, I'm telling parents and kids, we're really focused on the quality of food. We can always come back to kids they do a great job of not really moderating how much they take in, which I think is a good thing if we can have them focus on the right foods. We know that as people get older on the athletic side, they tend to undereat. And then we see a lot of issues that take place there, whether it's red S or hormonal issues on both males and female side. But for the younger population, again, I'm thinking in my head, like ages like 10 to 18, 19, food moderation usually isn't a big deal. It's the food choices that they're making. And so I like to put my attention on, okay, hey, let me teach you what's a good food, what's a bad food. And man, I actually hate that term. I hate the term bad food, but let me teach you let's look at non-processed foods and ultra processed foods. I'll use those terms because I don't like the good and bad. So if you could grow it, if you can kill it, if you can catch it, if you're in the grocery store and it has an ingredient list, we're looking for 5 or less ingredients on it. So think an apple. What's the ingredients there? It's literally apple, right? Or banana or rice or whatever it might, meats. We're staying away from the ramen noodles, and we're getting away from all the different cereals that are out there and the Pop-Tarts. We're getting away from that stuff. So it's teaching them just basic. Here's what's a low processed type food. This is what we want to backfill our day with. And then on the only actual specific recommendation I give them, other than that, is that I do like to teach them about the importance of a high protein meal or shake after the training session. So it starts to get them to think about, it's just building that base and teaching them that, not only does the type of food matter that I choose, but when I take in certain nutrients also matters. So teaching them about that post-training meal or shake is something I put a lot of attention on as well. And there's so much bang for the buck just focusing on those two things. And then again, you let those habits form. And then it's pretty cool because I'll hear parents say, look, my kid would come home and peanut butter and jelly and chips is what they would eat after a hard, football session. And now he comes home and he grabs a protein shake and a banana. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what we want. That's what we want. And then we can build off we can start getting into the specific gram per pound of body weight and all of the relative, dosing of stuff later on. But we just have to build the foundation of nutrition is definitely, calories aside, it's definitely the type of foods that we're choosing.
Yeah. We presented, and today, none of the credit, but Precision Nutrition has a little infographic thing where they have green foods, yellow foods, red foods, and it's really on that spectrum. The apple is the green food. It's an apple. Apple sauce is a yellow food. It's still apple, but it's a little processed. Maybe there's a little sugar at it, And then apple juice would be the red food. Does that mean you never have apple juice? No, but that is the most processed form of it. And then obviously if you throw Pop-Tarts on that spectrum, obviously that goes red. Does that mean you never have a Pop-Tart? Probably not. But does that mean you have to eat Pop-Tarts daily? Probably not. Please don't eat Pop-Tarts daily. If you're driving towards, elite athletic performance. I find so many of our athletes, because of, and this is going to dive nicely into the extra stressor stuff that we were talking about earlier. Our kids are so stretched, and specifically our good kids are high achievers. We are blessed to have the kids that come in and train with us. They're the valedictorian and salutatorian and captain of the volleyball, basketball, blah blah blah, whatever team. They are switched on kids, but they will get home late at night. Our volleyball team will practice till 9 o'clock at night. Some of these kids live 15 minutes down the road. Some of them live an hour and 15 minutes down the road. They're not getting home till 10:30, 10:45 at night. They're brilliant kids. They'll take AP classes, probably more than they need to. They'll stay up till midnight, 1:30, wake up at 6, in which to do and get out the door, but not early enough to actually eat breakfast. So they'll skip breakfast. They'll go through the day. They'll drink a bubbler at second hour to get through the morning. They'll hit lunch. And then the thing that blows my mind is that depending on the day, they have an AP Chem test, 6th hour. They'll be studying for AP Chem and they'll eat a bag of Cheetos and, and whatever, get to whatever. That will be the entire day until they, get home for lunch or get home for dinner or something before training or something like that. And be like, oh my gosh, you've gone almost basically 20 hours with very little nutrition, running through you. So, I mean, that you said it earlier, what you said, under-proteined and overed.
Yeah, essentially over energy, undernourished, over energy. That's a typical Western problem we have from a dietary standpoint right now.
Yeah. And I see our kids really, really struggling with that. So the post-meal shake, what a simple way to get good protein and some calories in you, right? Like really right when you need them. I don't know your thoughts on that little like post-workout recovery window. I think that's a little hippy dippy, but to get good food in you close to training, I think is a big deal.
Yeah. I usually tell, the anabolic window post working out, the research shows that there's really there's different takes on this, but overall, the quote unquote anabolic window, for those who are maybe unaware of this, is this idea that there's a certain window, a time frame post workout that you need to consume nutrients in order to maximize recovery. Otherwise, it's about a 2-hour window, but the gym bros would say it's 30 minutes. And that if you miss that window, it all goes away and you lose the benefits of whatever you take in if you're beyond that window. So the research shows that if it's during the day, then that anabolic window doesn't exist if you've had a meal already during the day. Now, it does appear that anabolic, quote unquote, anabolic window or post-feeding window does exist if you train first thing in the morning fasted, which I do, and I know several others that do. It does appear that to maximize recovery, it does help to get in something pretty quickly after that early morning workout. And I've always been a proponent of, I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to go an hour or two, whatever it might be, just due to life and until you can get your next meal or shake in. But there's definitely no harm in getting it in as soon as you can right afterwards, because the recovery starts when you leave the gym. You leave the gym, you leave the garage gym, wherever you go, weaker than you went into. The recovery process starts once you leave, and you have to have the building blocks for that recovery session. Well, where do those building blocks come from? It comes from your diet. You have to get those building blocks in there. So I don't think there's anything wrong with if right afterwards you want to down a shake or a meal. But you also, I want to make it a stressor to the point of I'm going to, stress out if I don't have something in 30 minutes, because there's been times I've had to jump into a meeting and it's been 2 or 3 hours till I could get something in. So I think that's where shakes do help. You can just take it with you. They're quick to get down. But again, there's context there. But I do like to teach the younger generation about, hey, post-workout, that's really where let's get something high protein in. And here's why. And again, it's so basic. It's just when you want to rebuild those muscles and that clicks for them. And of course, we could get super deep on it, but there's no reason to. I don't think so. We can keep it simple, and they seem to respond well to that. So
I find it with my own kids, who are 11 and 9, and parents, we always make mistakes of things. But my wife was extremely consistent with giving them very real food from the get-go, and I don't. Why not, skipping around the Gerber stuff and whatnot, like hey, let's actually mash the, puree our own sweet potatoes and do that route. But we find, and just for the overall health and stuff like that, when we're going the direction that we need to, like, and they're eating well, they're very pleasurable to be around. And when they're not, when they're hungry, or when we were in a hurry and they grab that easy to eat whatever snack or something like that, or did like it just like everything gets harder. And so I think if you're a parent and you're able to balance like not only your health and nutrition with it with your kids, and just make it a big family thing, I think everything is better. Like you're all nourished the way you need to. and just makes it brings down that stress level in life. Like we go to birthday parties, and I even remember when our kids were little, it's like, oh, we're having cake, and we really never have cake. And then I want to throw my kids up against the wall because they're so obnoxious, because they have massive sugar spikes that they've really never had before. And I'm not saying don't have cake at a birthday party. You have your cake, gosh darn it. Don't be weird, but like it's so interesting to see. So I don't know. I just think if that's why, like, if we're able to, like, we need to make this practical for people, in the way of what's normal. And yes, you will not lose all your gains if you train and then you have a couple hour meeting and then you can't get to something. But, if you plan a little bit and you train, you have that post-workout recovery shake, just waiting for you, or just the powder in the bottle, and you fill it up with water afterward and you take that to the meeting. Hey, we're on board. Like that's, a lot of good things there.
Well, and that's kind of where metabolic flexibility comes back in, because if you're metabolically flexible, your body should be fairly, so there people talk about being hangry. Those are usually blood glucose swings that are happening. And it happens to me too. I mean, if I go, there are times where Erica's like, we got to get you something to eat because you're just not someone I want to be around right now. That's what she'll say. So, and it definitely happens. I mean, you kind of enter it into the almost like this glazed over feel. But if you get done working out and you're having a hangry sesh 30 minutes post workout, that should be a telltale sign generally that there's probably some metabolic flexibility we need to work on there, because your body should have the capacity to switch over to your body fat and get you through the next couple of hours until you can find some food. I mean, just again, from a evolutionary survival standpoint, food was not just abundant 24/7 to people. I mean, the body had to be metabolically flexible, because when food wasn't around, that's why we do carry so much adipose tissue, so much fat, is that even for the lean individual, there's still a lot there to take you through several weeks without food. So anyways, to say all that, the other thing I was going to mention that you brought up with the cake is I was going to add that a big win for parents and kids is just avoiding blood sugar crashes. That really tends to be the big issue that I see, from whether it's behavioral issues when we're talking about nutrition, to adults having, again, maybe behavioral issues there as well in the workplace, where they start to feel, again, foggy, lightheaded, are these blood sugar crashes. And so it's like, well, how do we prevent the spike and then the crash that follows? And it just goes back to food choices. I'm not going to tell anybody to stay away from cake at a birthday, but if you're every night having cake post dinner and then your breakfast is cereal, Fruit Loop cereal, this highly ultra processed, this is all creating that what we call roller coaster effect with blood glucose. And it's just not beneficial. There are numerous reasons this is detrimental to both brain health and cardiovascular health and metabolic health. So really when we choose specifically carbohydrates, choosing these more complex type carbohydrates, I'm a big fan of. So whole grains, higher fiber. People ask, well, what about white potatoes versus sweet potatoes? They're both beneficial. They honestly are. So just, if you're asking me, hey, should I choose a white potato versus sweet potato? And you're no longer asking me, should I eat Pop-Tarts? Like, that's a win, right? Getting away from that idea is a win to me. So, if you're trying to figure out what kind of potato to eat or how to cook your rice, that kind of stuff to me is what I look for in getting people away from, again, these ultra processed foods where you totally bypass the system that tells you when to stop eating. Because you don't find in nature, you don't find foods that have a high sugar, fat, and salt content. They don't exist. So if you came across something like that, it would make sense that the brain which is still very old school, doesn't realize it's 2024 and we've got all this food around us. When it comes around something like that and the tongue interacts with it, the brain's like, take as much of this in as you can, because this is going to be great to store for later when there's a famine. And well, it turns out we don't have famines, at least not here in America. We don't have, for the most part, don't have famines anymore. So anyways, it's just, just basic biology and physiology and understanding that. But yeah, just avoiding those crashes from blood sugars is so important for the typical person.
Yeah. So driving back to the metabolic flexibility thing, if people are maybe carrying a little bit more body fat than they need to, they start to implement some strength training, or that maybe they already, they're trying to drive. Again, sleep is a big deal. To drive towards that 8 hours is a big deal. And I also found that people are very different. My wife tracks up more towards 9. Like anything after 9 o'clock bedtime, she does not do well. Yeah. Good. See, I wish I had that. I'd have 2 more hours of my day every day. But I think I'm close to that 8. Yeah. And I think that's interesting with people, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. People just need to find out what that is. I think sometimes people aren't real with themselves and know how tired they are at times. But, you get the strength piece, you get the sleep piece, you start to dial in the nutrition thing, and hey, drive towards more of the whole foods, protein levels at, that 1 pound per pound of body weight. And then it's really easy to get shiny object syndrome and be like, oh, cold plunges. Oh, saunas. Oh, intermittent fasting, whatever it might be. Before we hit record, we start chatting on these things. And the research shows saunas are good. Cold plunges are good. And so people will drive after those things, but there might be some negatives. Is it this is you'd agree with this?
Yeah. So the sciencey part to this is that we call these hormetic stressors. The hormetic theory suggests, or it essentially states, that a little bit of stress, so no stress is bad. A little bit of stress is good because it causes adaptation. And then too much stress is also bad. So it's this, what we call inverted U, where at the beginning of the inverted U, yeah, that's right. There's like no benefit, a lot of benefit. And then, hey, we're back to detriment. So where's that little bit of stress? Well, there are ways to measure that. And I'm going to bring it all back to the sauna and cold plunge here in a sec. So this is where a lot of my research steps in, so you have whole organism stress, and then you have cellular stress. So if we look at the cell can withstand, it has a threshold of stress it can maintain. A lot of times the cell is exposed to something known as free radicals, and we don't have to go down that, but you're constantly producing free radicals. And it's even worse if you're getting too much sunlight, if you're around environmental toxins, if you vape or smoke, anything like that. Increases free radical production. And if it overwhelms the cell, then it results in something known as oxidative stress. And you can measure this in the blood. And oxidative stress results in damage to all types of things like DNA and cell membranes and proteins. Okay. But as a person, as an organism, it's very hard to know if oxidative stress is occurring. So as an organism, the way we can look at whole body stress is, hey, do you feel under recovered? Are your hormones low? Are you low testosterone in men? Are you in an overtrained type state? So this goes back to something that we call, again, I'll tie it back in just a sec. This is something known as the allostatic load. Allostatic load says that regardless if it's the cell or organism, there's a certain threshold of stress you can maintain or withstand. And the moment you pass that threshold, it all comes crashing down. And so it's like, well, where's that threshold for everyone? Well, it's different. So part of my research early on was trying to establish a threshold of stress that each person can maintain. What's the resilience for you, for me, for someone else? And then is there a way to test that? And then if there is there a way to, once you can quantify it, can you improve it? Okay. But what I want to get across to people is that we start looking at the cold plunge, the sauna, and I've done work on with sauna, there are benefits there, but you have to remember these are all stressors. Training is a stressor. I said sleep can be a stressor in a sense. Being in a caloric deficit is a stressor. So there are some benefits there, but here's the issue is when you take these stressors and you start to combine them, you're contributing to that allostatic load. Okay. But now you've got financial stress or marital stress or job stress. These other stressors or kid stress, whatever it might be, there are other stressors that are also compounding. And what I've been seeing is that people are chasing the cold plunge and the sauna and these various supplements that also induce quote unquote hormesis. Metformin is one that can do this for people who are type 2 diabetic or have high blood glucose. And you end up, because you think you're compounding all these good things. And the fact is you're really compounding all these stressors. And then you end up having distress rather than eustress. Eustress being good, distress being bad. And so you do that day after day after day. And in your brain, you're thinking you're making these beneficial improvements and choosing to do quote unquote, do the hard thing. And it turns out like you would be better off not doing that. You would be better off. Hey, if you only have a choice between cold plunge and training, choose one. I'm always going to go training. But if you don't compound them, start being mindful of what does your just life look like? And let's be practical about it. Because just because the latest biohackers or influencers doing the video and showing you of them getting in the cold plunge, it just drives me nuts. So, and I just want to reach out to them and say, you're encouraging, it looks cool. I get it. It gets likes, but you're encouraging something that most people don't need. Most people don't need it if they're already taking care of the basics. If you're training, you're getting strength training and some type of aerobic work, you're focused, you're keeping a mindful eye on your nutrition, you're getting your sleep. Adding the cold plunge and sauna is going to have trivial effects. When I recommend the sauna, when some of the work we did, the sauna works really well in people that are disabled because it's an exercise mimetic, meaning that when you put them in the sauna, it mimics exercise. So we can take someone who's, say, paralyzed from the waist down, and you can put them in the sauna, and they can get the same cardiovascular benefits as someone who runs every day. That's where something like sauna really steps in and is a beneficial factor. Now, if you're doing it for, say, the mental benefits, there are mental benefits there. I'm strictly talking on the physical side. But, and people will push back and say, well, I've been doing sauna 7 times, a week or 5 times a week, and I've only noticed benefits. Look, that's awesome. But you may not be experiencing the stressors that I've experienced with other parents or other, just your typical person that, again, you just have to be aware that your cell, your organism, psychological, physiological stress, it's a balance beam. How many stressors are you putting over there before you tilt it in the wrong direction? And just be aware, everything that we do, everything is a stimuli, and your body responds to stimuli, and these stimuli are stressors. So, yeah, I think people have jumped to the other end of the spectrum too far. And, people are doing like cold plunges or cold showers before bed because it's supposed to help you sleep better. But then you step into the cold shower. What do? You start huffing and puffing. Your ventilation increases dramatically because it's cold. You enter into a fight or flight state. It's the same response you get if you get scared or if you were walking in the woods and a bear stepped out. Same response. And now you're trying to go to bed when you get out and you're wondering why your sleep isn't as good, even though people are telling you it is. So, it's just like, again, the physiology's there, but people don't know that. Instead, they see the influencers on social media, which one of the reasons I don't have social media. I think there are some benefit there, but I think there's just as much bad. And so people see this and then they're like, oh, I should be doing cold plunge. And then if they miss it for the day, they stress about that. So yeah, it becomes a lot for the typical person. And it's just keeping in mind like a global view on this.
Yeah. We just had Samantha Flaherty on the podcast, Power Athlete Nutrition, and she did a 30. I think she just got a bee in her bonnet. She saw the shiny object, and I've cold plunged before, and it's I enjoy it, but I could not agree with you more. Like it's there. I have pushed it on days where I should not have, and it's come back to bite me. But her thing was she did it like 30 days in a row. Like she did a 30-day challenge. Like every day she, whatever, 3 minutes in the cold plunge. And her biggest thing was like the mental side of it. And just the idea that like, hey, by doing this for 30 days in a row, like, did I notice anything physically going on in my body? No, not really. But like mentally, I felt like I felt tougher because I knew every morning I like, hey, and in this world where much of our life is very easy, we live in these, climate controlled rooms and we don't sweat and we're not cold and it's, it's absolutely perfect all the time. To do something like that on a daily basis and know that you're going to test yourself, in her words, basically just more the mental side than the physical side. So I think you nailed that. And Hunter, I struggle with this because I like pushing myself. I don't know when the end of the cliff is going to happen and I'm going to I'd love if we just were able to measure that. If my Oura ring could tell me, just Adam, stop right now. You're an idiot. Stop doing this. How do you, because my biggest thing is, and you're not there yet, but former athlete back in the day, all the things I could do, now I'm 44 and I can really still do a lot of those things, but the recovery, oh sweet Moses, the recovery, I can't kick it like I used to. How do you know how to balance, or what's your recommendation for finding that balance for people so they don't overdo on, they don't overtrain, whether it be the lifting things or they don't over cold plunge or the other things.
It's a great question. It's funny you said I'm not there. I'm already struggling with the recovery side for sure. That's the whole reason I switched over. I used to follow the program Johnny Wad, and it's just get after it every day. It's CrossFit. It's hit it hard, and now I'm on Grindstone because I simply couldn't recover from Johnny Wad like I used to. And I think that's probably years of college football and some other things as well. But, and I'm a hard charger as well. I was going to say, just taking a step back and coming back to this, but, for me, like I don't seek out a cold plunge every day, but back in the winter, I would go on runs and we live on the Tennessee River, or our school university is on the Tennessee River. So wintertime, get done running. My cold plunge was jumping in the river, and because it's there and I would do it. Oh yeah, very cold, moving water, but it's not something I'm going to go do at the house every day. But so it does become a question of, where's the stop line and where do I, how can I consciously tell myself enough's enough? And that's something I'm still trying to figure out for myself, especially once I've become more aware this past year of the recovery and how important that is, and realizing I can't push it like I used to every day. Because if I squatted 2 days ago and I deadlifted yesterday, and now today, my body just feels just shot. And this morning during jiu-jitsu, I caught a hamstring cramp and I was out for 10 minutes. And so, it's tough. It's one of those things where this is where being mindful of the body and mindful of my goal has really started to shift I went from a collegiate athlete linebacker to now my shift is going more the longevity route. I think most people experience this. That's in our field. And so from a training standpoint, even on the strength side, I'm not so much seeking absolute strength. I'm seeking sufficient strength. And now I'm trying to push that aerobic side a little more, again, maintaining my current muscle mass and now driving the cardiovascular adaptations like I can. So it all comes back to, where can I stop today that I can come back tomorrow and then pick back up, rather than where I'm at right now, where I squatted Wednesday, deadlifted yesterday. I'm going to jiu-jitsu this morning, but I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to have to take today off, the rest of today. And then I'm definitely taking tomorrow off, so now I've got 2 days of a stretch in my mind where if I had been a little smarter, I probably would do something tomorrow, whether it be a hike or just a little more moving than I'm planning on right now. So it's a tough question. I don't have the answer for it. I think it's just one of those things that you need to know what you can do and what you can't do. And then you got to be disciplined enough to say enough's enough, and again, I'm still working on that for myself right now.
Yeah. Dude, it's a hard thing. I love getting after it, and there have been. I've been impressed with myself. As I mid 40s here, and I do something like, that was awesome, and then like, gosh, I'll overtrain to the point of like it'll throw my sleep off. So then the next day is crummy, bad sleep, bad nutrition. Now I just want to eat whatever. I'm so starved, ravenous, hungry. I was good the day before I overdid whatever. I wish there was something that would tell Adam, you're done. But no, I think it ends up being a lot of,
you just gotta know your body, get in tune with it. And look, I mean, you've got one body, you got one ride on this earth. Why wouldn't you want to know your body as well as you could? Why wouldn't you want to know that if you feed it a crappy food, you don't feel great? There's a lot of, the majority of the population, they don't know that. The majority of the population, if they eat, for instance, I like to have a good burger, but I know generally I'm not going to feel great after, because it's not the type of meal that I usually have. Most people don't know that. So, it's just about learning to become in tune with your body. Man, life is so much better once you get to that point.
Very cool. Coach, I really appreciate your time. I know you have other things to get to. I know you're not on the socials, but if people did want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can. You can just look up my university email. I get people that reach out to me all the time from other podcasts or about research questions or nutrition. It's hswaldman@una.edu. But again, if you just type my name in, Hunter Waldman, the first thing that pops up is my university address. You can click on it. And then there's a couple websites that'll pop up that you can find me at. You're welcome to reach out, email. We are about to I'm a step away from the office for about a month or two for adoption purposes, as we talked about. So probably won't return anything too quick, but if you do email me, I will get back to it. You just got to give me a little grace in this little period of time right now. But Adam, I would love to come back on. We can pick back up and go the maybe more elite performance side. I know we didn't talk about that too much, but this field is so vast and there's so much to talk about. I know we were kind of limited just due to this other meeting I got to get to, but it's tough to get all this across in 1 hour, but it's probably a good step for another episode down the road.
It is. And let's be clear, we love our repeat guests too. So
nice.
That's perfect. Coach, I really appreciate your time. Good luck with the whole adoption thing. Like that. Yeah, this is exciting. That's awesome. That's absolutely, I'm thrilled for you and your wife. So yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for taking the time, Coach.
Yeah, thank you.
Listeners, thanks for listening. We'll check you on the next one. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for listening to another episode of Oak Performance Radio. Don't forget to check us out on the social at Oak Performance and online at www.oakstrength.com/Oak Performance. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.